Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. This week going back 30 years to 1995 when we talk about Royal Hunt's third studio album, Moving Target. But before we talk all things Danish prog metal, how are you, my friend? I feel like it's been a spell.
Yeah, trust me, the last week has felt like a year for me, and so yeah, we haven't spoken in years. It feels like, but I'm 80% set up here. So I think by the next time we talk, not counting the bonus episode and the Zoom chat with the Patreon folks, I should be up 100% up and running. But I have internet, I have a microphone and a camera set up, which literally just came through the last couple of days. I think I had to join a Zoom call for work with no microphone and no camera and just write in the chat box, I'm here, I just can't participate in any sort of way. I also almost joined a Zoom call wearing a Play the Old Shit t-shirt, which I forgot and had to tilt the camera upwards so that it could only see my neck and up, because I felt like that might not have been appropriate for a work call. So shout out to
could have won it today. I wouldn't have batted an eyelid.
Well, yeah, so. This is just an uncouth situation here that we have. So shout out to Aaron for the shirts. We should have made one for Pat because that would have really been apropos. It's been it just been a wild ride since Prog Power ended. Was that the last thing we did? Was that our last episode? Was the Prog Power recap? Because
yeah, and it's funny because I feel like so much has happened since then. It's gonna be an interesting chat. And before we kind of take a trip down memory lane with Royal Hunt, God, there's been so much stuff that's been coming out. I don't know if you've had a chance to keep up. I know things have been just wildly crazy for you, but I'd be remiss not to mention a few things that I've been listening to this week, not least of which is the new Primal Fear album, Domination. This album really surprised me. They've obviously had several lineup changes, which we talked about in the past over the last year or two, and they came back with a vengeance. This album really, really good, especially the front half. I thought the first half of the album was excellent, waned a little bit on the back end, but if you're a fan of that old Primal Fear style, there's a lot of that. But with the advent of Magnus Carlsen's songwriting, there's a little bit of a more melodic bend to some of this stuff as well, and I think that songwriting is prevalent. So I definitely recommend checking out this new Primal Fear album. I'll certainly post one of their songs this week. And then going in a little bit of a different direction, an American band that has not really released a new album in quite a while, Seaserin, has released their new album, The World Outside. It's 6 tracks. It clocks in at well over 70 minutes. So you're talking about an album full of epics. There's not a single song on here that doesn't clock in at 10 minutes. But if you're looking for an interesting blend of kind of American-style prog metal, you could do a lot worse than this. This album really impressed me. And then Between the Buried and Me came out with their new album, The Blue Nowhere. I'll be honest and say that after one listen, I still don't know what to make of this. I have to spend some more time with it. It is all over the place. I mean, absolutely all over the place. This is a band that obviously has blown up in many respects and has been just ascending in terms of popularity for quite a while now. But this album is just something that a prog fan would find something to love, just because it's so broad and so varied. But I'm going to give it some more time because I have not really had a chance to digest it.
Very good. I have to listen to all of those, particularly the Primal Fear. The singles, as we've said, were really good. So I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of it. I did listen to a couple of albums that are not that new, but did come out this year on trying to catch up on things. The Rivers of Nile self-titled album, I felt compelled to listened to this after seeing some of their set at Prague Power and spending some time with members of the band, and it was really an interesting album. I enjoyed it. It really like combines these elements of melodic death metal with the saxophone playing, and it's a really cool, different kind of vibe. And there's some good clean vocals too. It's not like 100% growls, so good stuff there. And then I listened to the Yunen album Forever Winter that you had recommended, which was kind of a melodic female fronted symphonic kind of album, and I enjoyed that quite a bit as well. So but to be honest with you, man, like the last 2 weeks or so, all I've been listening to is Rainseed and Majestica. From like seeing them at Prague Power and getting to meet the band, I've just been like riding this high that and let me tell you, like, this is music that I think helps you keep you productive. Like, I, especially yesterday, had very little desire to work, but I had to, and it was the fourth day of a 4-day work week, so I really didn't have too much of an excuse. So I just put on the entire Rainseed Majestica discography, hit shuffle, and it carried me through my day. And I listened to almost every song they've ever written, which is pretty awesome, outside of the Christmas stuff, which I'm saving for a more timely part of the year. But that's really been where I've been focusing my energies. But once things get settled, I do have a handful of albums that I need to catch up with that I'm looking forward to hearing. The Primal Fear being up there, as well as the new Amorphous album, Burning Witches, Blackbriar. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to give a listen to. The new Green Carnation. So that's kind of where I'm at. I noticed, I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but I know you did. There's a new single from Human Fortress called The Abyss of Our Souls. I haven't had a chance to listen to that. There's also a new single from Bloodbound called Defenders of Jerusalem. Those are 2 tracks that I need to give a listen to. But I plan on, this is usually like post Prague Power. I'm a little like meddled out in a little bit of a way. So like, I think I'm ready to start the recovery process, and that then I'll catch up. Thankfully, like, I haven't been grabbing as many albums as I have in more other years. And so I'm not overwhelming myself with things. I'm just kind of sticking to things that I really like know I want to listen to, unless somebody says you have to hear this. And it's just a little bit easier that way. So
yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming, the amount of new stuff. Speaking of bands with new stuff, the Halo Effect came out with an album earlier this year. We talked about that. It feels like ages ago, but nonetheless, it was 2025. But believe it or not, they've come out with a new EP, or in the midst of releasing a new EP called We Are Shadows. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is the track listing is kind of interesting, especially with the connection to this podcast. Not only did they cover I Want to Be Somebody by Wasp, which I'll try to post that this week as well. Really interesting rendition of that song, but they also covered Danzig's How the Gods Kill. So it's a lot of stuff we've talked about on the podcast, but it was the Halo Effect doing this covers EP. So really cool stuff from them. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the tunes when they are released. But the beat goes on, as they say. But I did spend the bulk of my week listening to Royal Hunt, and I say that because you want to talk about an album that's an easy listen. This album is just like comfort food for me. I don't listen to it that often. I don't have it in regular rotation, but whenever I play Moving Target, I just feel like I'm in my comfort zone. It's just so easy, and there's just so much to gravitate towards. I can't wait to talk about it in long form, but before we get there, what made you choose it, and what made you choose it this week?
The main reason I chose it is because, honestly, it was the next Royal Hunt album I wanted to talk about, in all honesty. But according to MetalArchives.com, this album was originally released in September of 1995. So we're on the 30th anniversary of this album, which is insane to me. It was released in Japan on December 15th, 1995, but it looks like the original release was in September 95 on the Kick Music label, which I have zero clue where that label is out of. I remember this album came out on Magna Carta Records in the US in 1998, which was actually after Paradox came out. And so at the time, I remember going on to cdnow.com and seeing like there's a new release from Royal Hunt coming out and thinking to myself like, oh, that's exciting. And then our friend Pat telling us, no idiot, that album came out, 3 years ago, which, I didn't know, but I ordered it anyway. And, boy, I remember enjoying the hell out of this. I loved Paradox. I believe we both gave that album a 10 out of 10. That is just one of those seminal, just phenomenal albums. And so I was very curious to hear this one, as it was the first album to feature DC Cooper on vocals. I'm fairly certain the band is the same lineup from Paradox: Andre Anderson, Steen Mogensen, Kenneth Olson, DC Cooper, and Jacob Kayer. So I was really interested in hearing this album because of how much I enjoyed Paradox. And I was also interested in kind of just hearing a Royal Hunt album that wasn't a concept album. It was just a collection of songs. And boy, I ended up really, really liking this album a lot. Come to think of it, it's possible in retrospect that I had gotten that double Live in Japan album, because that had a bunch of songs from Moving Target. I can't remember which one I got first. That one came out in late 99, so maybe not. But anyway, yeah, I just was really excited to hear more Royal Hunt. So this is definitely my second full-length Royal Hunt album experience. And in the future, I would start to pick up the older stuff and the newer stuff. I remember buying Fear when it came out at the Tower Records on Old Country Road. I think I bought that and the double Live in Japan album, both at the same time. One of those things where you see a European band in a domestic record store and get excited and have to buy it immediately. So a lot of good memories of this. This one definitely is a album that I remember back from being in high school and listening to quite a bit. And I agree with you. It's such an easy listen. Every song is excellent. Really good stuff. And this is just one of those albums that I always kind of the whole point of the podcast in the first place. It's one of those albums I consistently go back to and always wonder if Justin's listened to this in a while. And if not, he should. So, all that to say, that's why I chose it. Yeah.
Whenever anybody talks about Royal Hunt, Paradox is often, if not always, the first thing that comes out of people's mouths. I don't know if it's controversial or not to say this, but as I listened to this album this week, this is almost as good as Paradox. And I mean really, really close. This album isn't good. This album isn't great, but this is an all-time album for me. That's how strong these songs are. And I will say that there is a little bit of a weak spot on one song because it's simply good and not out of this world. So I'll kind of let the cat out of the bag, if you will. This is not a 10 for me, but it's not that far away because these songs are just so catchy. And at various points this week, I think every one of these songs was kind of stuck in my head because they're such an earworm. Would you agree? And I don't think I'm saying anything too scintillating here, but would you agree that this is the classic Royal Hunt lineup?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that people probably think about that. I mean, the lineup has changed so often over the years, and I'm not just talking about vocalists. Just there's been a lot of a revolving door of guys, and Andre Anderson's always been the rock. It's his band, and he's the one that's always been there on keyboards. I don't know if this lineup was together long enough to even call them a classic lineup. None of the Royal Hunt. I mean, maybe the current one has been together the longest. It's kind of
they have, ironically enough. So I think that's a very good point. but I think we can agree that they did. This lineup did release a pair of exceptionally good albums, and that's obviously why we're here. And again, looking ahead at some point, there's so much here that we should cover. Going back to the Henrik Brockman stuff early on, and then even the John West albums, later on that kind of fill out the discography. But there's just so much meat on the bone, if you will. And even the Mark Bowles spell when he was in the band for a few years. So there's a lot of stuff here.
They remind me of Yngwie in a lot of ways, because not just because of Mark Bowles, but they've had this slew of excellent vocalists over the years, and just going back, DC Cooper is now their vocalist again. But like you said, Mark Bowles and John West and Henrik Brockman and DC Cooper. I mean, that's an all-star team right there. I remember when I got that double live album and I started to hear some of those tracks from the first two albums, I was like, oh man, I need to pay attention to these albums and also get the full live 1996 double album, which we did cover earlier on in the podcast's existence. And they cover a lot.
The first and only live album I think we've ever done on the show. Actually.
I think you're right. They were touring Moving Target at the time, and so I think they play almost the entire album on that live album, and then a smattering of tunes from the first two albums, of which some of my favorite Royal Hunt songs of all time come from Clown in the Mirror and Land of Broken Hearts. Land of Broken Hearts, the title track in particular, is an excellent song, and as we talked about on that episode, DC Cooper really does justice to those songs from the first two albums. But when I went back and listened to those albums, I was taken at how much I enjoyed Henrik Brockman's vocals, and almost like I didn't miss the DC live versions at all, because his vocals, he has a very unique voice, and so I enjoyed a lot hearing his voice and getting to know him as a vocalist. So that was great, and it's funny how things circle back, because we talked about that Timeless Fairy Tale album that came out last year that Henrik Brockman sang on, and it was like, the second coming of the old version of Royal Hunt. So just kind of a brief run through of like the history of the band up to that point. But this was their third album, and I'd say at that point it probably was their best of those three. I thought that the production made a very big jump from Clown in the Mirror to Moving Target. This is a really crisp sounding album, and Paradox doesn't slack in that category either, but Moving Target sounds, for a 30-year-old album, sounds really, really well recorded and well produced.
Yeah, all well said. And before we jump into it, I would be remiss not to mention two other names that in many ways I think separate Royal Hunt from other bands, and that is Maria McTurk and Lise Hansen, the backing vocalists. Those two female backing vocalists add another dimension to these songs, and you've seen them live. I've seen them live. They're playing 70,000 Tons of Metal next year, which I'm super excited about. But those backing vocalists make all the difference, not just on an album like Live 1996, but even on the studio albums, because they found two singers that complement the lead vocalist so well that it is, and I'll point out certain spots where I think that's exceptionally prevalent, but they do make a very big difference in terms of the band's overall sound. And so I didn't want to record this episode and not mention those two, because I think that they are an integral part to this band.
Absolutely well said and well deserved. I remember seeing the band live for the first time with Mark Bowles on vocals, and they had the backing vocalist. I don't know if it was Maria and Lee still at that point, but they had two female backing vocals, and it made such a difference in the live performance, to the point where when the band came back to Prog Power and played Paradox and didn't have the backing vocals, it was a noticeable difference not having them there. I mean, it didn't make it like a bad performance, but it would have been better if they were there. And I'm sure with like the visa issues becoming more and more of a problem as years went on, it was probably easier to, have two people sit it out and have pre-recorded, backing vocals, but they were definitely missed, I thought. So yeah, very deserving to mention that, because that is such a just such a classic part of Royal Hunt's sound is not just having that incredibly talented lead vocalist, but having those backing vocals really make a difference.
I got one more question before we start. They have often been labeled as a progressive metal band. Do you agree with that? And I ask because even though the keyboards are very prevalent, I've always had a hard time kind of boxing them into a category. They're not power metal. They're not heavy metal. But I'm not really entirely sure that they're prog metal either, because these songs are so song-driven. It's not like they're just going out there and showing off their technical chops or anything like that. But they're almost in the vein of a threshold if they're going to be considered prog metal, insofar as that it's a band that does write very good songs. They just happen to be really accomplished musicians, and they do have keyboards which accompany the guitars. But would you call them a prog metal band, or would you call them something else?
I would say yes, like a melodic progressive metal band. Particularly, I think Paradox was a more progressive album than Moving Target. Moving Target really is, to me, more of like a Frontiers kind of release, where it's just a super melodic, almost AOR based. I don't know, there's just a catchiness to it. Whereas I think Paradox had a little bit more of a technical kind of side to it. So yeah, I think that's a really fair question to ask. I mean, I've always considered them a prog metal band. I don't really think that power metal makes a lot of sense in this case. But man, this album and a lot of tracks from the first two albums, I think really are more on that melodic, AOR kind of style. And I think that they kind of progressed, no pun intended, into being a little bit more progressive, especially with Paradox and the themes and the technicality and some of the longer tracks. There's really nothing on this album that's particularly long. I think the longest track maybe is 6 minutes long. So yeah, the opening track is 6.5 minutes long. That's the longest track on the album. So yeah, fair question. I think that in this case, they're definitely leaning more melodic than prog, but definitely there's prog elements. I think the extensive keyboard use, I think, especially kind of makes it feel a little bit more on that proggy side. And Andre is to me, he's like the Yngwie Malmsteen of keyboard players. He's just such an incredible keyboard player. This band just does not exist without him.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And so for all intents and purposes, I'll call Moving Target prog adjacent as opposed to just strictly prog metal. But you mentioned that opening track. It's Last Goodbye. It clocks in at 6.5 minutes. It is the longest song on the album, and it's the longest song on the album by about 1.5 minutes. This is not an epic, but it definitely starts off with a song that is a little bit denser than I think some of the others. But it's a 10 out of 10 song, no matter how you slice it. And the opening with those strings and that slow drum beat behind it is like this curiosity that slowly starts to pick up pace and leads into just this perfect opening track. And before long, you're just off to the races. Obviously, and you mentioned it, those keyboards are just so noteworthy. There's no Royal Hunt without Andre Anderson. And when you hear that bass kind of just chime in little spots, really good. And I guess it speaks to that mix that you talked about earlier. And as good as Henrik Brockman is, DC Cooper's vocals are so good on this album and lend itself to the music so well that it's almost hard to picture these songs fronted by somebody else. I love how the verses have the heavy violins and strings. I think that is just an element of Royal Hunt that other bands don't do nearly as well, incorporating those strings into it. And of course, that big catchy pre-chorus and that big bombastic chorus that follows. A phenomenal opening track, a staple of their catalog. And The only thing that confounds me a little bit is why there's someone, namely DC Cooper, saying the Our Father at the end. Short of that, other than not understanding the point there, what a great song.
Yeah, incredible. I want to say that they played this song when we saw them the first time with Mark Bowles. I know they played something from Moving Target, and I remember being really excited about it. It could have been Far Away too, because I think that's probably one of the more well-known songs from this album. Probably Last Goodbye and Far Away are the two big ones. Actually, they both had singles, so that kind of makes sense. Yeah, this is a really, really good song. An incredible way to open the album. I remember listening to this album on the bus on the way to school when I was in high school, and I would just like play it on my Discman, and there were songs that I just loved listening to. And this is just such a good tune. I love it. There was a time when I was in high school that, like, other than Michael Kiske, DC Cooper was my favorite metal vocalist. I just thought he had such a unique and powerful voice, and I was so excited to get to see him live for the first time at Prague Power 3 when he performed with Silent Force. I got to meet him. I got a cool picture with him. He was a nice guy. It was cool. He's always been up there with, when I first became a fan of metal, it was like, Kiske, Zach Stevens, DC Cooper, like those were like the big ones for me. So, those high notes that he hits, on some of these songs that, Last Goodbye being one of them, like it's pretty incredible. So, interesting, that I'd like to kind of look into like how they found him, because I don't remember him being in another band prior to Royal Hunt, and like the band was from Denmark and DC Cooper was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So very curious how they found him. John West made a little bit more sense when they hired him because he had a discography prior to Royal Hunt, but DC Cooper like seemingly came out of nowhere and fell right into their laps.
I am not entirely sure if what I'm saying is accurate, so I may just be having a senior moment, but I often wondered the same exact thing, like what was the connection here? I believe it was through the label, and again, if I'm making this up, find me a better story or prove me wrong, like tell me I'm wrong, but like I believe it was through the label, and what wound up happening, if memory serves, is that Royal Hunt had the Shadow Gallery connection and other things through being a Pennsylvania guy, and just, Gary Weirkamp and all the guys that were doing the Shadow Gallery stuff on Magna Carta. I think that the introduction was made through the label or somebody in the industry. They're like, listen to this guy sing, and then all of a sudden he was on the Royal Hunt albums. Because to your point, I don't think DC Cooper in and of itself had a massive discography prior to being in this band. He was just a local musician in the Pittsburgh area, and then all of a sudden, I guess he auditioned for Royal Hunt because of that connection, and then he was off to the races.
Well, they made a hell of a choice. This first track is like quite the introduction to him for, a lot of people. Pretty awesome. And again, like you said, much like on Paradox, and I don't know if these are synthesized violin, patches or actual violins, but there is a violin vibe that, Andre Anderson really sticks to, and it's become kind of, part of what makes Royal Hunt. So this song is a perfect example of that. You'll hear like that strings-esque sound, even if it is, actually just synthesized.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's a sound that would carry on through the years. As we move ahead to 1348, the album really doesn't take a step back despite how great that first song is. Talk to me about 1348 and your thoughts on this track, which is more in line in many ways with the rest of the album, with these 4-minute songs that just you're in, you're out, it's catchy, and then you move on.
Yeah, I want to apologize to you for not getting your joke last night when you said I hope the podcast ends at 1:38. I didn't do my army time calculation in my head to be completely fair, I was a little bit under the influence of a edible, so that might have had something to do with not getting the joke. But yes, now I get it. I will aim to cut this off immediately at 1:38. So to do your joke justice.
1:48. Get the time right.
Oh, sorry. Look, ask Ash. Like, I'm just not good with these time, these time conversions. Anyway, any song on this album, honestly, could be my song of the week, with the exception of Autograph, which is like a 3.5-minute instrumental tune. No joke. I would argue that any one of the songs on the album otherwise are phenomenal songs. I'm going to go with this one, though, because there's just this sort of epicness to it that it starts out like with this almost 80s-esque kind of intro with the backing vocalists that come in. It's like this 80s keyboard-esque intro. Then like there's some acoustic guitars and it sounds like it's going to be mellow. DC comes in, and then the electric guitars come in and the drums, and it just builds and builds. And then there's just like this, it's like almost like it's like just building and building and building. And then all of a sudden that classic Royal Hunt sound kicks in with the keys and everything. And the song is off to the races. DC doesn't like come back in and start singing again to like the last minute of the song. It's essentially like a half instrumental song. It's so good. And his last high note at the end of the song is freaking epic. This is such a good song. I really struggled with picking a song of the week because I love this whole album. But I'm going with this one just because every time it came on, I was like, damn, this is such a good song. I feel like it didn't get like the appreciation it probably deserved when it first came out. Outstanding track. So here it is, 1348 from Royal Hunt's Moving Target.
I am really glad you chose that track. It was in contention for me with just about everything else on this album. There's something so unique about how parts of this song have that acoustic guitar with a melancholy vibe. And then there's other parts that are the most upbeat, majestic, and melodic thing. And that contrast for me is what makes songs like this great. In many ways, this is a genre-defining track, and I say that because if you never heard Paradox and I just played you 1348, you would be absolutely, utterly blown away. It just so happens that I heard songs like Message to God first, so I knew what I was in for when I heard this album. But this is such a good track, and it's songs like this that really remind me of how this band is one of a kind and how like there's nobody else doing music or playing or recording music that's like this. So excellent choice. Not my choice, but I can certainly understand why you picked it. Another one that was in contention was Making a Mess, right? Track number 3. This song almost starts off like a war march, but it quickly evolves into something else entirely. The verses are really powerful, and it's almost like telling this story about the protagonist figure on the track. But then you get to this pre-chorus and chorus, which are amongst the best on the album. And this was one of those earworms that just stuck in my head the entire week. Simple, catchy, and those poignant backing vocals, which just add that other layer to a song which is relatively simple. And of course, that keyboard solo, vintage Andre Anderson, vintage Royal Hunt. This song is another one that's every bit as good as the first two, and it's arguably even tighter than the first two, just because of how you're in, you're out, and then you're on to the ballad.
This was a song that I discovered via the live 1996 album because oh no, I'm sorry. This was a song that I was excited to hear on the live 1996 album because I'd never heard it played live before because it wasn't part of the. I don't think it was part of the double live in Japan, which was an album that was released domestically where it took like a portion of live 1996 and condensed it onto one disc, and then the second disc had the Paradox Live on it. So it didn't have all of the tracks that were originally on it. And this was one of them that I really wanted to hear done live. This was probably my favorite track on the album at one point when we were a lot younger. I always thought this and like Step by Step were like really underrated Royal Hunt songs. But this is one of my favorite songs by them. This is like, I don't know how much demand there would be, but like I would kill to hear Royal Hunt play this album live with their current lineup for the 30-year anniversary. Like I feel like nobody talks about this album, and they really should. It's outstanding.
It's not like it's a step back really from Paradox. It doesn't have the conceptual themes. It may not have that over the top quality, but find me an album where each song is just as good as the last, right? And it's got a little bit of everything, because when you get to track number 4 with Far Away, you get your power ballad, that one song which kind of slows it down just a little bit. It has that superb build with the phenomenal backing vocals once again. And it's almost like this mix between a church hymn and a video game soundtrack. And that's kind of all I needed to hear. Like, I love Far Away. I would not want to hear anybody else sing the song. Like, DC Cooper has to sing this song because his vocals on this track just shine and almost soar through the air with this grace and this class that's in a class by himself, right? And when you blend that those vocals with the strings and the guitar riffs on this kind of power ballady song, you're 4 for 4, and it's not even close. Like, every song so far has been great.
Yeah, this is, I think, I see why this was chosen as a single, because there's something very accessible about it, and it's a really beautiful ballad. It's I feel like it always was fascinating to me how this band was so big in both Japan and Russia. Outside, like, you know, typically, I guess it's not that unusual for metal bands to be more popular outside of the U.S. than, like, you know, than in the U.S. But like for Japan and Russia to be the two spots that Royal Hunt really seems to resonate with, and I just always think about this song as like just like Japanese people going crazy for this song, and it's a really, really nice ballad, well placed. No complaints about track order on this album. It's really well ordered, and this is a really nice tune. And again, I can't remember if this was the one that Mark Bowles sang when we first saw Royal Hunt. It's possible. Also, another great tune for the backing vocals as well. Really just well done, and still has like some good solo work in it too for a power ballad. Really, really great song, and I'm glad it was included because the album didn't need to be like, you know, as Seamus would say, banger after banger after banger.
Well said. And, you know, as you move on here and you kind of get to the midway point, you mentioned earlier how Step by Step is kind of underrated. I mean, again, as far as Royal Hunt goes, I agree with you. This was another one that I toyed with for a second, making my song of the week because it's underrated. And I'm not sure why it's not as big of a song as the first 4. Those ones I think people talk about the most on the album. But this is every bit as good. What made you say it was quote unquote underrated? I agree with you, but why did you say that?
It has kind of like a jazzy quality to it that, like, you know, it's
Yes.
almost like you want to tap your foot and snap your finger, and like it's there's just some like a real catchiness to it. It's a really easy song to get into, and I feel like it sounds really different from all the other songs on the album. It really stands out, in my opinion.
I was gonna say it has like that scat-like vibe, but I'll accept jazzy. But because it's just the way that you kind of tap your toes and snap your fingers to the music, there's like a subdued quality to it, but it doesn't make it any less melodic, and so therefore I love it.
I like when Andre uses the keyboard patches that sound like an actual piano and not synthesized, and in this song, he uses them here. Again, the backing vocalist too really put it over the top. Like, I would, again, not to repeat myself, but I would kill to hear the current lineup with the backing vocalist just sing this whole album start to finish. I wonder if DC could handle some of the high notes at this point. I mean, it's a tall order. It was probably a tall order for him when this album first came out. I mean, these are some like ungodly sounds that are coming out of him.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of Keith Sedano on The Edge, where he hits some of these notes, and you're like, "How is this possible?" And you know, I don't think it's with the aid of Pro Tools or something else. I think he literally sang this stuff. I just don't know that he could do it anymore. And how can you fault the guy? DC Cooper's 60 years old at this point, and to sing some of this stuff, I think would be damn near impossible. Whereas Paradox, I think it's in a lower register for the most part, so he's not really extending himself in quite the same way. The one thing I would say about Step by Step that I didn't really mention is that the last 45 seconds is almost of like an outro that's a bit unnecessary, and it's almost like a lead-in to Autograph, which is that instrumental song you mentioned. But I'm a big fan. I like that dance-like chorus that, you know, you just kind of want to bop around to. Very different, very unique, and really doesn't sound like anything else, but it doesn't miss a step to me.
I like the end of the track. Like, it always made me think of like some sort of like outdoor market or somewhere where you're just kind of hearing music playing off in the distance or something. That's always the way I pictured it. I don't know why. That's just it's an interesting little outro rather than just kind of fading out. So I just thought
I'll take it.
Yeah, I thought that was always like a cool little like flourish at the end there. And actually, before we move on, I just wanted to mention, just to add a little bit more color to the DC Cooper thing, I just pulled up his Wikipedia page, and I had forgotten that he actually was first put into the international spotlight because he was a finalist to be Rob Halford's replacement in Judas Priest. And because of the buzz of his audition, he got offered a lot of positions in a lot of European and American bands, and he chose Royal Hunt and joined the band at the end of 1994. So that is kind of, I think, where he became known. So that just thought I would throw that out there.
Well, I mean, Judas Priest could have done a lot worse. I don't know that he's got the strength of a Rob Halford, but he can certainly hit every note that's in that catalog.
It's interesting, too, because I think Silent Force kind of had some Judas Priest vibes to it, and they even did a Judas Priest cover, at least one. So it kind of makes sense that DC would kind of move on to. I always thought it was interesting how different Silent Force was from Royal Hunt, which was DC's next band after Royal Hunt, which was had more of a power metal kind of flavor to it. So yeah, I just thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah, well said. I'm glad you mentioned that. That instrumental track Autograph is really just the great keyboard intro. It features that piano sound that I think you like, at least in parts, and the backing effects provide kind of this layer of density to the track, which makes it a little more interesting than other instrumental tracks, perhaps by some other bands. But it's very well orchestrated. It's really one of the heavier, faster tunes on the album, the bridge notwithstanding. But I think it's a quality tune. I wasn't going to make it my song of the week, but you're kind of in, you're out, and then after about 3.5 minutes or so, you're on to the next track, Stay Down. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it breaks up the album much like Far Away does. I have no problem with this at all.
Yeah, this was kind of a thing that Royal Hunt was doing on their first 3 albums. On Land of Broken Hearts, you had Martial Arts and Freeway Jam. Clown in the Mirror had Third Stage and Moving Target as Autograph. So those first 3 albums all had at least one instrumental track, and I think that it was really kind of a focus on Andre's keyboard playing, and so it's kind of more of a instrumental showcase, I would say. So it's probably my least favorite song on the album, but it certainly is not out of place, like you said.
What do you think about Stay Down, the next tune?
The last 3 songs in this album are all outstanding. I love all 3 of them. It's like, I don't know if I could pick one over the other. I just am such a big fan of all of them. But this one is just this one just starts out with so much oomph, and DC's just at his peak. All the instruments are killer. I feel like the mix really does a great job, really showcasing the drum work without over modulating it and making it too much. The drums sound really, really crisp. This was a song I remember from that Live in Japan album. That this was one of the live tracks that they had on there. Just an outstanding tune, and I think probably one that people that remember this album probably remember this one as one of the more standout tracks. Just an outstanding tune.
It's a beautiful song, and I feel like nobody ever talks about it. Like, when was the last time you ever heard someone talking about Royal Hunt? And then if you did hear them talk about Royal Hunt, were they talking about Stay Down? They weren't, but I would argue that it doesn't get overshadowed by anything else on the album. It's that good.
I'll be fair. Royal Hunt does not come up in conversation terribly often in my day-to-day.
That's fair. But I'll say this. Have we ever talked about this track? No. And we've obviously talked about the band. So I think that says something. I think there's really some great bass lines on here, and it speaks to the mix that you mentioned earlier. The chorus is just catchy as all hell, and I think that of all the tracks, this one might be mixed the best because you actually get really interesting sounds coming out of both the left and the right channel. And I love how it ends with just those fading backing vocals. It's a phenomenal tune, and in retrospect, I'm this close to changing my song of the week, but I'm not going to do that at this point. I will say this. By the time we get up to Give It Up, which is track number 8, this is the one song for me that is good, but not mind-blowing. And so when you lump it in with the last 3, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to why. But this one is just not stellar. It does have this nice slow build to it, and the vocals are almost especially during the verses, it has a proggy quality to it. This is one of the proggier tracks on the album, but the chorus always felt just a little flat as compared to the others. It's repetitive, and it's just a little less than. And although I've certainly heard much, much worse, but if I'm going to be consistent, this is the one track where it takes a slight dip for me.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that it has kind of a proggy vibe to it, because it reminds me of the song Time Will Tell from Paradox, where it just kind of has a little bit different of a feel to it. I probably felt similar to you in the early days of listening to this album, and this is one that's really grown on me over the years. I think it's one of DC's best performances on the album, in all honesty. I could understand thinking that it's not as good of a song as, Stay Down or Time, which, preceded and followed this track. But this is one that just I think grew on me over the years. Just great solos, Andre's doing his thing, DC's doing his thing. I don't know. I feel like we may have a disconnect on this one. I think this one holds a candle to the previous and next track. I just think these last 3 really, really end the album on a really high note.
Well, obviously we now get to Time. And obviously it's my song of the week because I haven't selected anything else to this point. So I will explain to you, and I'll say it this way. Perhaps Give It Up is just a little less than, because I love Time so much and I know what's coming at the end of the album. So why don't we give Time a listen, and then we can both share our thoughts on this final track. What a way to go out on this album. That acoustic guitar sound with the vocals is enough to have me hooked right at the outset. But it doesn't last long, because when all of a sudden DC comes in with some of those favorite high notes that only he can do, this is vintage Royal Hunt. It's upbeat. The lyrics are very thought-provoking, and it's just kind of capped off with the infectious chorus. It feels like the song is almost ending with about a minute to go, and then all of a sudden it's drawn out, but in like the best way possible. The way this ends is just so good, with those perfect keyboards that kind of just fade out. I forgot how good this song was. I was so almost convinced that I was going to go with one of those first 4 or 5 tracks, that by the time I got to Time, I was pleasantly surprised at how good this album ends. And so I wanted to go with something a little bit different. But really, I could have gone with almost any of these songs, and I would have been very satisfied.
This is a great choice, honestly. It's in my opinion, the only way to end this album, just both lyrically and just musically. Really outstanding track. The band clearly agreed, because they ended it. They ended I think their set list on most of the Moving Target tour with this song. The end of Live 1996 is incredible, because they do they play Running Wild and Epilogue, which are 2 of the best early Royal Hunt songs. They go into an acoustic set and play Age Gone Wild, 10 to Life, and Legion of the Damned, and then finish the set off with Kingdom Dark and Time. I mean, holy crap, that is an unbelievable way to finish off a set. And I have to go look and see what we ranked this live album when we covered it.
It's such a good live album. It's not my favorite, but it is probably in the top 2 or 3 live albums I've ever heard. That's how good this album is.
I gave it a 9.5 and you gave it an 8.5, so clearly it was held in high regard. And this song is just another outstanding track. I love it. I just think I wouldn't have, unless you chose Autograph as your song of the week, nothing you picked could have really surprised me or upset me or anything. Like the album is just that good. And I think like actually having to put a rating on it really made me realize just how good it is. Even I think I may have underrated the album myself. But before we do that, there's a couple of extra tracks I wanted to mention. There's a really good acoustic version of Far Away that was, I think, a Japanese bonus track.
That's right.
And this song really, as the ballad of the album, fits an acoustic setting really, really well. I don't know that there's too much to say about it. It's just a kind of a toned down version of the original. But I think this was a bonus track also on the US version of Paradox, maybe, or maybe the US version of Moving Target. It's so hard to keep track because they released so many versions of albums. No, I'm sorry. It was a bonus track on the US Moving Target album. It may have been on both. I'm going to double check, but feel free to share your thoughts on this acoustic version.
Obviously the song that lends itself the best to this kind of a version, but it's really a stripped down version of the what I call the power ballad version of the song. Really, really good. Love the guitar work. Obviously, I think it stands out because it's just a little bit different than the stuff that comes on the album proper. But I've got nothing bad to say about it. It's a great bonus track and a great choice for a stripped down version of a song.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was not on the Paradox. The U.S. version of Paradox had Martial Arts and The Final Lullaby as its bonus tracks. And the U.S. version of Moving Target had, let's see, Magna Carta, had Far Away, Acoustic, and Restless. And I'm glad, I want to mention Restless. I've had an incredibly difficult time pinpointing when the hell this song was recorded because it's a bonus track on the Moving Target US version, but it's also a bonus track on the live 1996 Japanese version, I think. It's like one extra studio version. The band made a music video for it. And I'm pretty sure it was on one of the versions of Paradox also. I toyed with making this my song of the week. This is one of the most underrated songs. And I may have mentioned, we may have talked about it on the Paradox episode. I really don't remember, to be honest with you. But this is an outstanding song. It came on randomly while we were hanging out at our Airbnb at Prague Power while you were visiting us, and the guys from Rivers of Nile were there, and I was like, "Damn, what a great song!" I play this song a lot. I think it's one of the best B-sides that any band's ever released. It's such a good song. Kind of a more subdued tune. I don't know if I'd call it a ballad, but it has kind of a chill vibe to it. DC sounds awesome, but I could not figure out if this was recorded during the Moving Target or the Paradox sessions. Because the Moving Target album that came out in the States, like I said, didn't come out until 1998. So it's possible that it was recorded during Paradox. I just was not able to pinpoint it. So, but it's a hell of a song.
I will give you a pass on that.
Okay.
Sorry, I blacked out for a second. I will give you a pass on that. Let me just say that regardless of when it was recorded, the song is great. And so I would have kind of laughed if you made it your song of the week because there's so many other good tracks. But I'm glad you mentioned it because if we didn't talk about it during Paradox, we should be talking about it now. Just a great tune. So
it's possible we talked about it on all three Royal Hunt episodes that we've done because I think it might have been a bonus track on all three of them at some point in time.
When we do Land of Broken Hearts, we can talk about it then too. It's that good. I have no problem with that. Even though I know for a fact it was not out during that album. But yeah, good stuff. I'm glad you brought that up. I am so curious, and I have been really all week as I went back and listened to this, as to what your score on a scale of 1 to 10 would be, because I have a number in mind, and it was not the number I expected, even though I knew how much I love this album.
I'll mention one last thing. There was an EP that was released around the time of this album called Far Away, and it had a bunch of live tracks on it, very similar to the live 1996 tracks, but definitely recorded at a different time. The live tracks were recorded in Japan in 1995. They did Wasted Time, Flight, Stranded, and Epilogue, which are all tracks from the first two albums, and it's kind of like, I think, was meant to be kind of an intro to DC Cooper in a lot of ways, in addition to the single Far Away, which we talked about. But there was another track, another instrumental track called Double Conversion, which I don't know if a lot of people are aware of it. And it has kind of like a Castlevania-esque keyboard thing going on by Andre Anderson. Very like kind of spooky and harpsichordy. It's a solid tune, but if not unspectacular, I thought it was worth mentioning just as just to complete all the stuff that was recorded during this
I don't
time.
know that I've ever heard that. I'm really curious to hear it. I don't even know if I knew it existed.
Yeah, I'll happy to share that with you. But that is kind of a cool little thing. Similar to the Maxi EP that the band released in '94 that had a bunch of acoustic versions of tracks from the first two albums. So yeah,
nice. So with that, you can delay no more. I want to know exactly what this score is, and I kid, but I'm just so curious as to what you're going to give this.
Yeah, this one for me is a 9.75. It's just shy of perfection in my opinion. I think that the instrumental track brings it down ever so slightly, and it's kind of hard to just give it the same score as Paradox. But it's pretty damn close as far as I'm concerned. It's just it's an all timer for me, and I like I said, I think even I underrated my own feelings about this album. It's just that good, and I think it along with Paradox really marks what might have been the peak of this band. As good as the band has remained over the years, it's just that these two albums are just so good and just so seminal that I just don't know if you could really say that any of the albums that followed compare.
Yeah, I am not far off. Like I said, there was one track that was just less than stellar to me. I'm giving it a 9.5. This album, if you would have asked me going into it, I probably would have said it's going to be in the mid to high eights, but I can't put it that low because every song is just so intoxicating and so endearing. And it's not nostalgia because I haven't listened to it in a while. It's just really an album full of good, catchy, melodic, and thought-provoking songs. So excellent choice this week, I have to say. It was nice to go down memory lane and listen to this.
I will say, if there's anybody out there who is not that familiar with this album or listened to it a long time ago and hasn't gone back to it, I urge you to listen to it again and reach out to us and let us know if it resonated a lot more than you remembered it, because I think it's one of those albums I think may have been lost to time, and I felt like I needed to ring the bell and give the old hear ye and try to remind people that it wasn't just Paradox. These two albums released 2 years apart are really outstanding, and again, there's some really good stuff on the first two Royal Hunt albums as well. I'm sure we'll cover those albums in time, but this was one I really wanted to talk about at some point, and being that it was supposedly released originally in September of '95, it seemed timely to celebrate its 30-year anniversary. So great stuff. Glad we got to talk about it.
So before we talk about next week, I just want to mention several news items that have come to light. Lots of interesting stuff going on. A new band has formed featuring Colin Edwin and John Wesley, both of Porcupine Tree fame. They've called themselves Voyage 35, a name that people may recognize at least tangentially from the song Voyage 34, a classic Porcupine Tree song, basically about a bad drug trip. But I say that because hearing these two guys play old Porcupine Tree music that the band really doesn't focus on so much anymore is kind of interesting to me. And a lot of their material that it sounds like they're going to play is stuff that I've just never heard live. So if this ever hits stateside, I'm going to go check out Voyage 35. I think that's really, really interesting. Something else I thought that is interesting, and a band that we are absolutely due to cover, Armored Saint. They've got 11 songs. It's seemingly available for the new album, according to John Bush. I am just such a sucker for this band. Even though I don't love all the new material, they write really good songs, generally speaking. And the older material, which I want to go back to with you, is just so classic. And I know we're both large fans of John Bush. So I think that this would be an interesting time to really get into them. And lastly, Twisted Sister back together, announcing their first reunion concert in 2026. Somewhat surprising that we've not done a Twisted Sister album on the podcast, but I look forward to doing that as well.
There is an album in the request queue, so
From them, yes. So we will get to that. And I will say this. I had picked out an album in August, but because of scheduling and whatnot, it was an anniversary album, and we did not get to do it. It was Mandelion from The Gathering. I thought it was going to be a really good time to do that album in honor of its 30th anniversary. And I was not upset, but because we didn't get to it in August, I figured let me do it this week. I think it would be a fun album to cover. However, in other news, the singer and the voice behind melodic death metal band At the Gates, Thomas Lindberg, has passed away from cancer at 52 years old, which is really sobering given the fact that we are not that far away from that ourselves. And that is just a really scary thing to think about. But I know there was just an outpouring of support for At the Gates because of the fact that this band in many ways, and certainly Thomas's vocals, played such a pivotal role in so many bands after At the Gates broke onto the scene in the 1990s. And so I'm going to pivot away from The Gathering again. I would like to cover that album before they play Prog Power next year, but I do want to talk about the, dare I say, quintessential At the Gates album, Slaughter of the Soul, which also came out in 1995 and ironically was on my list to cover in November because it was celebrating its 30th anniversary. However, we're going to bump it up 2 months in light of the untimely passing of Thomas Lindberg, and we're going to talk about some classic Swedish melodic death metal from 1995 next week when we cover At the Gates' Slaughter of the Soul. Are you familiar with this band at all?
Not really. So I'm looking forward to digging in. I wish it was under better circumstances, but as it can be sometimes. Sometimes it takes a crappy thing to happen to kind of open your eyes and ears to something you may not have been as familiar with, and so that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I look forward to checking this out, and I will try not to mention to Annika next year when we see her that you kept delaying her album Mandelion. But I do look forward to talking about that album. It might actually be a better to talk about when we get closer to Prog Power next year. But I look forward to you pulling it out at a later time. I actually have a few albums. I think I have all my albums for October kind of planned out. We have a request from our friend Keith to open up October. So looking forward to seeing what you have chosen for your, I think you only have one album in October to choose, which as scheduling happens, sometimes that's the way it goes. But yeah, looking forward to getting back on the swing of things after 2 weeks of kind of like just Prog Power based episodes. Back to the music. So
back to the music indeed. Thanks for joining us on this journey. It's been fun. I can't wait to see what the rest of the year has in store. I have a bunch of albums lined up for the rest of the year as well. And of course, the requests which keep coming in from our Patreon members. We appreciate you more than you know. So with that, it is almost 1:48 as at the time of this recording. So I think we'll go out on a high note. So close. Enjoy the week, my friend, and I will talk to you very soon.
We could just say that it's 1:48. Like, nobody knows what time it is.
Nobody knows.
So, yeah, take care. Glad to get back into the swing of things, and I hope that I will have my completed recording space ready to go next episode. So, until next time, take care.